Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Welcome back everyone. Today we are going to discuss about the left ventricular global systolic function. And that's one of the most common topics in ICU because that's why we pick up the echo probe in the first place to try to check out our patient's systolic function. So we will try to simplify the concepts about this topic today. And it's an easy, repeatable, non-invasive way to check on the contractility of the left ventricle and to be able to identify and classify the cause of shock in your patient. So just one thing about positioning of the patient before we start. So if you are going to do quantitative assessment of the left ventricular function, you have to be in true echo planes to be able to get accurate measures. Otherwise, your measures will be off. And for that, you have to improve your patient positioning, get them to the left side, put the right side up. And for the subcostal window, you have to put the patient flat with the knees bent if possible. And for the ergonomics, you have to improve the position of the machine so that you can image well from the side of the bed, whether you are imaging from the right or from the left side of the patient. Improve your grip on the transducer as if you are holding a pencil, and that really will improve your fine movement with the transducer on the patient's body. And also you need to rest your hand on the patient so that you can get a better grip of the transducer and better images and avoid fatigue of your hands. So what is the definition of LV systolic function? It is the ability of the LV to change its size and shape from diastole to systole. And we can classify the LV systolic function assessment to global assessment and regional assessment. And the main focus of this lecture about the LV global systolic function. And we can classify that into quantitative assessment and qualitative assessment. So for the quantitative assessment, there is linear assessment, 2D assessment, and 3D assessment. The scope of this lecture is to talk about the linear and the 2D assessment. So for the linear, we have the fractional shortening, mitral, annular, plane systolic excursion, which is the MAPSE, and the EPSS, which is the E-point septal separation. First, to measure the fractional shortening, you get a good parasternal long axis view. Should be a typical view with all the definitions of the typical parasternal long axis view. And you can either measure it directly from the screen on 2D imaging, or you can apply your M mode perpendicular to the walls of the LV on the parasternal long axis, and you get the view. You measure the LV diastolic dimension, which is the maximal diameter of the LV, and then you measure the LV systolic diameter, which is the minimal diameter, and then you get a calculation of the ejection fraction from the machine. There is an equation as we can see here, but there is an automatic preset in the machine. So if you measure the diastolic diameter and the systolic diameter, then the machine will give you an ejection fraction directly. The most important pitfall about the fractional shortening that you have to be perpendicular on the wall, and the M mode cursor needs to be at the tips of the mitral valve. I like to measure it more on the M mode because of the accuracy of determination of the walls, so the measurements will be more accurate and reliable. And this is the equation if you want to know it, but you don't need to do it yourself because the machine will do it for you. You can do still the fractional shortening on the parasternal short axis view, but take care that you need to avoid the papillary muscles. And you need to be at the mid-pap level as well. Normal, it's more than or equal to 30%, but if it is less than 20%, it is considered to be severely impaired. So the fractional shortening comes out of what is called Tychel's regression formula. And again, you don't need to calculate that. The machine will calculate it for you. So there are some pitfalls to the fractional shortening method, that it assumes that the heart has no regional wall motion abnormalities, and assumes that the heart shape is ellipsoid shape and that the measurements are centered and perpendicular to the wall. So now we talk about the MAPSE. So it depends on the longitudinal movement of the cardiac muscle fibers, and it has been shown to correlate with the LV function. So the longitudinal muscle movement is movement of the longitudinal muscle fibers from the base of the heart to the apex of the heart, and we measure that with the M mode. And as we all know, TAPSE is a very common measure of the right ventricular systolic function, but the MAPSE is the mirror image of that assessment for the left ventricle as well. But the TAPSE is way more popular than the MAPSE because the RV function is mainly a longitudinal muscle fiber function, while the LV function is a combination of longitudinal muscle fiber and circumferential fiber to be able to generate high force, to overcome the afterload, the high afterload in the systemic circulation. It doesn't matter when you measure which grain you are following, but it's very important to measure the same grain over time so that you will have an accurate measurement. A MAPSE is a crude method of assessment of the LV systolic function. If you have a MAPSE more than 11, then it gives you an impression that you have an ejection fraction more than 55%, that's in a male. And if you have a MAPSE more than 13 millimeters, then you have an ejection fraction more than 55 in a female. So it's not like a clear-cut, accurate method of assessment of the LV systolic function, but it excludes severely impaired LV systolic function. So E-point septal separation is actually an important method of measurement of LV systolic function. Not necessarily that you are measuring it on the screen, but it's important to eyeball the anterior leaflet of the mitral valve and see whether it can come up and touch the septum or approach the septum. But if you think that the anterior leaflet of the mitral valve is no way near the septum, then you think about severe impairment of LV systolic function. And the reason why that happens is because the left atrium needs to get a large blood volume from the LA to the LV during diastole. So the two leaflets of the mitral valve just wide open, and then the blood ejects from the LA to the LV. But the problem is, if the LV is severely impaired in terms of systolic function, then the blood that's leaving the LV during systole is not much, and the residual volume inside the LV is high, and then there is no chance for the left atrium to evacuate lots of blood to the LV, because the LV is already distended and full of blood. So the anterior leaflet of the mitral valve will not be wide open, because not a lot of blood can move from the left atrium to the left ventricle. So the EPSS is the measurement between the anterior leaflet of the mitral valve to the septum, and if it is more than 7 millimeters, that gives you an impression or indicates that the ejection fraction is less than 30%. So again, it's a rough method, but it gives you an impression about the ejection fraction of the LV. So you get a good parasternal long axis view, and then apply your M-mode on the anterior leaflet of the mitral valve, and then measure the distance between the anterior leaflet and the septum. You need to measure the smallest distance between them. And actually, this is the E-point septal separation. So you can see here, there is an E-point septal separation of 3.5 millimeters, so that's normal. And there is another one of 29 millimeters, which is hugely abnormal. So the linear assessments are easy, but the pitfalls about them that they are limited by arrhythmias, being off axis, or regional wall motion abnormalities. And it's like a single number, so that's why it's not that much accurate. And the American Society of Echo does not recommend calculation of ejection fraction from linear methods. So the next method of quantitative assessment is the 2D assessment, which is the area measurement. And that's essentially the fractional area change. So you get your parasternal short axis view, and you freeze the image in diastole, and that needs to be at the mid-papillary level. Then after freezing in diastole, you trace the area of the LV, and then you come down to systole and then freeze it, and then measure the area by tracing the endocardial borders. And then you use the equation of the fractional area change, which is the left ventricular end diastolic area minus left ventricular end systolic area divided by left ventricular end diastolic area, and all of that is multiplied by 100. And the normal fractional area change is between 35 and 65%. So anything less than 35 is considered as abnormal. And it's important to exclude papillary muscles from the tracings when you measure. And this is an example for fractional area change. So if you have the end diastolic area of 22.4 and the systolic is 16.2, so it will be fractional area change of 28%, which is, so that indicates low ejection fraction. So what is recommended by the American Society of Echo is the Simpson's method of discs, or the biplane disc summation method, which is usually referred to as Simpson's method. So for using the biplane disc summation method, you have to get two apical views. So you have to get the apical 4 and then you get the apical 2. And you need to do two measurements on each plane. So you do the measurement of end diastole tracing in the apical 4 and then end systole tracing. And the machine will store that. And then in the apical 2 chamber view, you get the end diastolic and then the end systolic measurement. And then the computer creates 3D cylinders, which are called as discs, and then it adds its volumes and then gives you an ejection fraction at the end, which is derived from the formula of ejection fraction equals end diastolic volume minus end systolic volume divided by end diastolic volume, and it uses that for two planes. So it's called biplane method, and it gets the mean of these two planes, and then it will determine the ejection fraction based on that. So that method simulates as if you are getting a plaster cast inside the LV cavity, and then you just pull out this plaster cast, and then you try to measure the size of that cast in systole and diastole, and that will determine the difference between them, and that will determine again the ejection fraction of the LV. The most important thing and the most important pitfall about the Simpson's method of disc that you need to trace the endocardial borders correctly. That's number one in systole and diastole, and you need to exclude the papillary muscles from both views. So the main problem about the Simpson's method of discs that it needs a good apical view, whether it's apical 4 or apical 2, and that's not possible in every patient, and it is time consuming, but it needs really good images, and you need to zoom on the LV because a small error in tracing of the endocardial border can result in a big difference in the calculation of ejection fraction. And this is the gold standard to measure the ejection fraction of the LV, and actually this is the method that the sonographers are using when you order a comprehensive echo for your patient in ICU. And as we know, the ejection fraction is the left ventricular end diastolic volume minus left ventricular end systolic volume divided by left ventricular end diastolic volume, and the normal value is more than 52%. So this is the example of apical 4 chamber view in diastole. Can you see how the sonographer is cutting the left atrium into two halves and focusing on the LV to get accurate measures? Then get the systolic measure for the apical 4, and then move to the apical 2 chamber view and get again the systolic and the diastolic measurement, and then the machine will be able to calculate the ejection fraction for you. And to classify ejection fraction by the American Society of Echo guidelines: normal, mildly impaired, moderate, or severely impaired. So normal is more than 52% up to 74%, mildly impaired 41 to 51, but we say 40 to 50 is mildly impaired, 30 to 40 is moderately impaired, and less than 30 is severely impaired. So a rough method of estimation is more than 52% is normal, 40 to 50 is mildly impaired, 30 to 40 is moderately impaired, and less than 30% is severely impaired. So the important question that we need to ask ourselves in ICU is that low ejection fraction of the patient is contributing to my hemodynamic instability, because some of our patients live in the community fine, perfectly fine with 35% of ejection fraction, but they come in ICU in a state of shock, and then you do your ejection fraction assessment and you find them having 40% ejection fraction or even more, and then we attribute that mild LV impairment as a cause of shock, but that might not be true. So you might look for the other parameters and don't depend on a single data that comes from the echo as an ejection fraction as your cause of shock in your patient. So it's important to try to get the views that we can calculate the LV from in our critically ill patient, which is not always possible, but we have to try. And the clinical scenario must be taken into consideration as well. And that's what we usually do in our critically ill patients, that we don't depend on a single measure or a single way of assessment of our patient, but we need to take the bigger picture into consideration. And we need to use the critical care echo in its right context. Critical care echo is not a statement into the chronic status of the LV function, but it is an assessment of the current status of the patient now. And as we mentioned before, the biplane disc summation method or Simpson method is great an assessment of the ejection fraction, but the problem is that it requires good, clear definition of the endocardial borders, and it is time consuming as well, so not possible to do it in every patient in ICU. So now talking about the ultrasound enhancing agents, which is used to be called as echo contrast. So the question is, are these agents limited to the echo lab, or we can use them in ICU as well? And the answer is that there is no patient population benefit more than critically ill patients from the ultrasound enhancing agents, which is the echo contrast. So this is not like a true contrast. It is a microbubbles of high molecular weight gas. So it's gas encapsulated in a shell of phospholipid or albumin. So some people say that I have allergy to contrast, and that's why I cannot use echo contrast, but that's not a contrast. It's a gas, microbubbles of gas, and in a shell of phospholipids or albumin. And the reason why we use them in ICU is to get better delineation of the LV endocardial borders, and that's the most common use, or enhance the Doppler signals, detect LV thrombus, and that's another common use for them in ICU, or detect post-myocardial infarction, LV aneurysm. Then move into LV chamber and thickness quantification. Typically, we do that in the parasternal long axis view, and we can use the M mode for better identification of the LV walls. So that's the anteroseptal wall and the infralateral or posterior wall at the level of the tips of the mitral valve in diastole, and then you measure the thickness of both of them. And as you can see here, it's easier to measure them by M mode. And it's important to place the cursor at the level of the mitral leaflet tips, and at the end diastole, you get your measurement. And you can identify your end diastole by the peak of the R wave on the ECG. So that's why we need to connect our ECG to the patient. It can be measured in 2D as well, but if you are going to measure your thickness in 2D, you have to have good quality images, and you have to get accurate border assessment and accurate cursor placement on the 2D image. So as intensivists, the most important measures that we care about is the ejection fraction and the left ventricular end diastolic diameter. So we talked already about the ejection fraction, but for the diastolic dimensions, anything more than 6 centimeter will be considered as severely dilated LV. So in a male patient, it's like 4.2 to 5.8 centimeters. And for a female patient, it is 3.8 to 5.2 centimeters. But if I measure the left ventricular diastolic dimension and I find it more than 6 centimeters, that is severe LV dilatation. And actually, that's what we care about in ICU. Then we talk about the qualitative assessment of the LV function, which is the eyeballing. So the most important part about the eyeballing method of assessment of the LV function is that you use the quantitative measures first, and you train yourself and your eye to the normal and abnormal things. And then when you do the qualitative assessment, so your eye is already trained, and you can just eyeball the LV and then be able to tell that this is an impaired LV or this is a normal LV function. So it comes from doing the quantitative assessments multiple times in the past, train yourself, see a lot, and then you'll be able to assess qualitatively whether this LV is normal or abnormal. So for eyeballing the LV systolic function, you need to focus on 4 things: myocardial thickening, endocardial inward excursion, LV cavity reduction from diastole to systole, and regional wall motion abnormalities. So starting with the myocardial thickening, normally clear systolic thickening roughly about 30 to 40% or more than that. So 30 to 40% thickening is considered to be normal. Mildly reduced is definite but reduced thickening. Moderately reduced is minimal thickening, and severely reduced that almost no thickening or akinesis. Other supporting measures that we use is detection of regional hypokinesis or wall motion abnormalities or akinesis or dyskinesis. All of these things give you an impression about the LV ejection fraction or systolic function. EPSS is another measure that you can use, but you can just eyeball that, and we've mentioned about that before. It's not necessarily that you measure the EPSS, but you can see the anterior leaflet of the mitral valve going up, opening, and getting closer to the septum or even touching. So that's normal. If it's no way near that, it's just barely opening, that's an impression that there is a severe impairment of the LV systolic function. Another quantitative measure that you can use is MAPSE. So if you can see that the mitral valve lateral annulus is moving longitudinally in a good way, then this is an indication that the LV systolic function is normal. And you can simplify that by just good thickening, strong inward movement, marked LV cavity reduction equals good LV systolic function, while poor thickening, little inward movement, and minimal cavity reduction indicates severe LV dysfunction. So if you apply the criteria that we mentioned for this example, you'll find good thickening of the LV walls, strong inward movement of the walls as well, and marked cavity reduction. So this indicates a good LV systolic function. And also if you look at the EPSS and the MAPSE, you'll find that they are normal. So if you apply the same on this example, you can see that there is poor thickening of the LV walls, little inward movement, and minimal cavity reduction with very poor EPSS. And there is poor MAPSE as well, so that indicates severe LV dysfunction. So this concludes our assessment today for the LV systolic function. Next lecture will be about the LVOT VTI use in ICU. So uses, pitfalls, and how to calculate the cardiac output. Thank you.